Hello, folks. I want to talk a little bit tonight about the Cliven Bundy trial out in Nevada. If you've been doing your homework, you know that he's a rancher out in Nevada who had some issues with the Bureau of Land Management, BLM, and overgrazing fees. And it's a complicated issue, but they try to make it real simple. And of course, if you listen to the liberal media, he's a welfare rancher. He just didn't want to pay his grazing fees. Well, that's not the case at all. You never want to listen to the mainstream media when it comes to complicated issues, and especially issues out in the hinterlands, in flyover country, because they don't know anything about it. They don't know what they're talking about, and they don't care to. They have a narrative they're trying to push, and that's what they do. But this ranch had been in the family for several generations, so we're talking, 100 or more years of having grazing fee arrangements with the federal government. And in the past, especially through the 40s, 50s, and 60s, there weren't any problems at all. And then what has happened out west in many cases, and not just there, but in a lot of other states, the federal government has decided that they're going to take over all that land, and so they're running ranchers off. The private family rancher is being run off. They raise their grazing fees. They get very particular about little rules and regulations that are written into the Bureau of Land Management's purview, so that they can go out and, oh, you built this water pond wrong, you took too much sagebrush out, it's that's a protected plant over there, it's a fire hazard, whatever. They get you coming and going. They've been doing that for decades, and what they've done is they basically run these families off. People just get sick and tired of dealing with it. They'll sell it and they'll move on, and that's what happened in this particular valley. There were somewhere in the neighborhood of 12 to 15 ranches out there a few decades ago, and Cliven Bundy is the last one left. And fortunately for us, as Americans, he's a stubborn old fart, and he just wouldn't give up. And so he's been fighting them for many, many years, and for the most part, he's won in court several times. The government's won a couple times too. He does owe some fines and stuff. And but he insists that they are not acting in good faith, and that he doesn't believe that he should have to deal with them in that manner. Back in the day, the Bureau of Land Management worked hand in hand with ranchers. The object was for the land to be productive and to be safe against wildfire and a refuge for animals and such, and they all worked together to achieve those goals. The money that went that grazing fees raised for the government was put back into the land for improvements, and there came a time where that wasn't the case anymore. In this particular case, Harry Reid, senator in Nevada, well, he had some backroom deals that he wanted to get going on out there. They had some uranium they wanted to get mined. And this happened to be right around the time that Hillary Clinton was making her Uranium One deal with the Russians. So you got to pay attention to this stuff, because it all ties together. But nevertheless, it came to a confrontation at one point where the Bureau of Land Management decided they were just going to take his cattle. Well, if you're not going to pay us our fees, we're going to take your cattle away from you. And so they came out there armed to the teeth, flak jackets, big SUVs, rifles, M16s and such, which begs the question, why is the Bureau of Land Management armed to the teeth like that? It's ridiculous. If they're doing their job properly, they don't need to be armed at all. But this is a very instructive thing for Americans to see and understand, and I hope you research it a little more, pay a little closer attention, and think about it deeply, because this is, to me, a very important point in trying to turn this country back around to what it's supposed to be. There was one of our founding fathers, and apologize, I can't remember exactly who, might have been Thomas Jefferson, might have been somebody else, but basically said that when the people fear the government, you have tyranny. But when the government fears the people, you have liberty. and we're supposed to have liberty. And most people don't understand the Second Amendment. One of the primary purposes of the Second Amendment is so that the government will fear the people. They're intended to. And so when you saw those pictures of the militia from all over the country, neighbors, friends of Cliven Bundy came out there to his assistant and blocked the BLM from his property and said, no, sir, no, sir. You're not taking this man's cattle. We're not allowing it. Now, they didn't fire any shots. They didn't point down range. They just simply showed up and said, we're armed too. If you don't shoot, we won't shoot. They have Second Amendment rights. They have every right to be there, and they have every right to be armed. Well, BLM doesn't like that. That's not the way the government's used to doing business. You're supposed to roll over and just bend over and take it because we're the federal by God government. Well, that's not the way it's supposed to work in America, and I hope you understand that. There's a lot of people that look down on that and said, oh, those guys are crazy. A bunch of people out there with guns, they got to take care of. The government's got to take care of that. No, the government doesn't have to take care of that at all. The government needs to get the hell out of there. If you want to take a man to court because he owes you some money, go ahead and take him to court. That's fine. Let him fight. Let him get a lawyer. Take it all the way to the Supreme Court if that's what it takes. But just because it's taken too long, and you've got another sweetheart deal that you want to make with some Chinese, doesn't give you, the federal government, the right to come in there armed to the teeth and try to steal this man's property from him, and that's what they tried to do. I encourage you all, please research this stuff. Don't pay attention to the mainstream media. One thing I like to do in situations like this, I look to local media, local TV stations, local papers, radio stations, programs they have, and you'll find out a much deeper understanding of what's going on. But this trial never should have happened in the first place. The BLM never should have been out there armed to the teeth in the first place. The BLM shouldn't be armed to the teeth in the first damn place. But it was, nevertheless, and here we were. And so it ended up going to court. He was arrested for several things, and it's been in court for a couple of years now. And what they found out is that the prosecutors, surprise, surprise, weren't turning evidence over to the defense in the case. They had a whistleblower within the BLM that found out that they had rogue elements in the BLM who were just mean, nasty people. They talked about killing folks. They had kill lists. They talked about how they like to push people's faces down in the ground in the gravel and really grind their face down in the ground when they could. Things like this. This is what they were doing. They were a bunch of dadgum cowboys in there that thought that they could go out there and do whatever they wanted because they were the federal damn government. Well, that's where the people fear the government. That's tyranny. That's tyranny, and that's not what we're supposed to have under the U.S. Constitution here in the United States of America. We're supposed to have liberty, and that means that the government needs to fear the people. They don't need to be coming out there messing around. Federal government that has no business coming out there messing around somebody's property unless they have a really, really good reason, like sedition or something. They didn't have that here, nothing even close to it. We're talking about fines for grazing fees, for Christ's sake. It's insane. It's insane. And it's the government that made it insane. And you need to know that. And just on a quick note, now that this is done, the judge was a liberal judge. She did everything she could to try to get the prosecution through this thing, and she just couldn't drag them across the line because they were that terrible. She had to admit finally that they were just a rogue bunch of prosecutors, and she had to get rid of them. And she got rid of the case altogether. And he's been let go now, and that's a good thing. And now we've got this case of the Malheur refuge up in Oregon that was... protesters took over. Again, they were armed, but not harming anybody, not pointing the guns at anybody, not specifically threatening anybody, just saying, hey, we have a right to be here too, and we don't like what you're doing up here, and we were wanting to protest it. Well, they didn't like that. Government didn't like that. They were stinging from this thing at Bundy Ranch, and this was Bundy's son that was up there running this Malheur refuge thing. And they wanted to get him. They wanted to get him bad. They were embarrassed. They were embarrassed that they had to turn tail and run down in Nevada. And they wanted to make sure somebody paid for it. And they did. Lavoy Finicum paid for it with his life. They set him up at a roadblock and they murdered him. flat, simple, murdered him. They ambushed him. And don't listen to these people in the media try to tell you, oh, he tried to run a roadblock. That's not what happened. Again, I encourage you to do your own homework. Look out there and find all of the videos that were taken from inside the car with the audio. Listen to the conversations that were going on. Watch exactly what happened, and then make your mind up. For one thing, they stopped before they got to the roadblock. They discussed whether or not they should turn themselves in. But they were going to see a sheriff in the next county, and they thought that he might be a little more friendly to them. They were scared. They were feared of these people. So you had the FBI out there telling them, get out of the car, and they're trying to decide, do I get out of the car with these guys, all these guns around me, or do I go to this friendly sheriff and say, hey, I'll turn myself into you? And they told them, we will turn ourselves in to Sheriff so-and-so if you let us go. And they wouldn't do it. They wouldn't do it. One guy in the front seat says, I want to get out. They said, okay. He stuck his hands out the window. A shot is fired into the vehicle at that point. Now, later they said it's a pepper round. Well, we're supposed to know it's a pepper round, aren't we? How the hell are you going to know it's a pepper round or a full metal jacket? You don't know when you're out there. You hear a shot in the car. What are you going to do? You're behind the wheel of a car. You're thinking about giving up, and all of a sudden the guy puts his hands out the window. They shoot inside the car. What are you going to do? Well, they took the hell off. That's what they did, and I don't blame them. Now, on down the road, you look at the way they set up the roadblock. The roadblock was around the curve. It was around the curve. You could not see it until you were almost completely around the curve. There were icy roads. He had no chance to stop. He could either wreck or he could try to get around it. That was his only two choices at that time. Well, guess what else? There were two FBI agents there that started firing upon the vehicle before it ever got to the roadblock. Everybody thinks all the firing happened when he was in that snowbank and he got out of the car. No, sir. That's not what happened at all. They started firing at him before he ever got to the roadblock. So that's 2 or 3 times that they were fired at while they were in their vehicle before they ever got to the roadblock. These people feared for their life. And if you listen to these videos inside the car, that's what they said. They're going to kill us all. They're going to kill us all. That's what they said. So he pulls over, he gets in that snowbank, and he gets out, and he says, just go ahead, just shoot me. Just shoot me. And they did. And when you see his hands going down, they say, oh, he went for his gun, and so we shot him. No, he was already shot. That's why his hands were going down. He was already shot. And they had already shot rounds into the car while he was parked in the snowbank. You can see the window shatter in the video. There was a young girl in that car, maybe 18 years old. He didn't want her hurt, so he got out of the car and he took it for everybody else. He sacrificed his life for the people in that car. That's what really happened. The 2 FBI agents that shot at the car previously picked up their brass from a crime scene and then lied on their reports and said they didn't shoot at all. That's what they did. That's what your FBI did. They lied. They picked up the brass from a crime scene, didn't turn it in, and then lied about whether they shot or not. They were found out for it, and they were reprimanded for it. And then it all went silent. It all went quiet. Nobody knows what happened to them. Oh, there's an investigation going on. Well, we can't tell you right now because there's an investigation going on. And as soon as we know something, by golly, we're going to come tell you. No, they're not. No, they're not. They're going to hide it. They're going to sweep it under the rug. They're going to move on. They got their man. They got their little blood, their ounce of flesh for daring to challenge the authority of the United States of America. This is not the way this country's meant to be, folks. I hope you understand that. Again, I hope you research. I hope you understand what happened that day. This man was ambushed and murdered. And the primary reason is that TV interview he did. They called him the Blue Tarp Man because he slept outside on the porch underneath a blue tarp. He said he liked to be under the stars. This guy was just a good old grandpa. Good old rancher and a grandpa. Everybody knew him. Said the same thing. He was just a great man. But he didn't like to be fooled with, and he told them, don't come in here pointing your guns at us. You know, we're not like that down here. You don't come in here and start pointing your guns at us, because we got guns too, and we're not going to allow that. That was a challenge to the FBI, and they took it. They took that challenge, and they murdered him. Your government murdered a private citizen because they were embarrassed. Because they were embarrassed over collecting grazing fees. This all goes back to grazing fees. Land management. They murdered American citizen over land management. Now, is that the country you want to live in? We all have to make these choices. That's not the country I want to live in. And so I'll do everything in my power to make sure they can't do that type of stuff. We're going to elect the type of people who get in there and they'll change this mess once and for all. Thank you.